Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For today, I will explain the chapter 2 for FNC 3823, Module 2 for Registered Financial Planner RFP program. Okay, this first slide introduces the second chapter. While Chapter 1 dealt with understanding risk at a conceptual level, such as what risk is, how people perceive it, and how tolerance varies, this Chapter 2 shifts to the operational question. That is, once we understand risk, what do we do about that risk? Risk management in the context of financial planning is the organized process of dealing with risk faced by a client. Also in this chapter, I will present the 6-step framework for managing pure risk, that is insurance-related risk, while noting that the same framework can be adapted for speculative risk, such as investment risk, which will be covered separately in Module 3. The subtitle that mention the 6-step process for wealth conservation frames the chapter's central argument, that is financial planning has a dual nature, accumulation and conservation. And this module focuses squarely on the conservation side. The foundational framework for risk is financial planning operates on two axes. On one side sits wealth accumulation, which involves building assets through investment and is exposed to speculative risk, such as equity markets, unit trust investments, and business ventures. This will be covered in Module 3. On the other side sits wealth conservation, which involves protecting what has already been built against pure risk that can destroy it. The definition of pure risk is any event that can first reduce or destroy the built wealth, or second, any event that can extinguish the ability to earn income to fund a desired lifestyle. For example, critical illness requiring liquidation of current assets, or premature death that extinguishes the capacity to earn income for dependents. The balance or the seesaw visual here is effective as it shows that both dimensions must be in equilibrium. Accumulating wealth without conserving it is building on sand. From this slide, we can see that it correctly notes that this module covers the conservation side. There are 6-step risk management process as an overview, giving students the complete roadmap before diving into each step. The 6 steps are the first step or step 1, setting risk management objectives. Step 2, gather information for risk identification and evaluation. Step 3, analyze information to identify and evaluate risk. Step 4, develop risk management plan. Step 5, implement risk management plan. And step 6, review, monitor and revise risk management plan. the module, the second module for this course describes risk management as an organized approach to the problem of managing risk faced by individuals. It evolved initially out of the need to deal with pure risk, that is insurance related, but has since been extended to speculative risk, or sometimes we call as financial risk management, to distinguish the two. For financial planning, both must be handled, but this module addresses only pure risk. Setting risk management objectives is the first step and begins with the question, why are we doing this? Or what do we want to achieve? The objectives define the direction of the financial plan and give meaning to the recommended actions. The client must identify with the plan and appreciate that its success will lead to achieving the financial goals that have been set. Risk management objectives can be categorized into two. First is pre-loss objectives, and the second is post-loss objectives. The pre-loss objectives concerns structural requirements built before a risk event occurs, while post-loss objectives is about anticipating the aftermath. There are three pre-loss objectives. First is efficiency, or the cost factor. Here, the financial practitioner must determine how to manage possible losses in the most cost-effective way feasible. If a term policy can cover the risk of death adequately given the client's circumstances, there is no reason to recommend an expensive endowment policy, especially when the client has a greater need for protection than savings. Efficiency means maximizing the use of the client's available resources to achieve the desired risk management objectives. This requires thorough analysis of needs versus products already in place. The lessening of distress or the stress factor. Here, the practitioner maps out the potential risks that concern the client, particularly those with direct or indirect financial impact on the client and dependents. For a sole breadwinner, the anxiety of premature death on the family is acute. This stress can be diminished by instituting a life insurance policy that creates a sufficient capital fund for dependents. Once detrimental risks are identified, a proposed plan of action to diminish such loss exposures can be constructed. The third one is external responsibilities or the obligation factor. Some risks are imposed by third parties and must be mitigated regardless of the client's personal preferences. A bank may require a mortgage reducing term policy for the loan amount. A landlord may impose through the tenancy agreement that the tenant must take a fire policy for the premises. These are non-negotiable obligations that the risk management plan must address. Also in step 1 is post-loss objectives establishment. Post-loss objectives represent the other dimension of step 1. Rather than building structural protections before a risk event, post-loss objectives anticipate the client's circumstances after a risk materializes. The slide presents this as a resource gap analysis, that is, comparing current resources against the required resources after a catastrophic event to identify the deficiency that must be bridged. For the resource gap framework, that is, before the risk event, the client has current resources. After the event, shown here as a lightning bolt representing structural failure, those same resources are placed within the context of required resources. The gap between them is the deficiency. That is the amount the client cannot cover from existing means. To anticipate the aftermath, a series of diagnostic questions that define post-loss objectives must be identified, such as what happens if a critical disease strikes? Are there adequate resources to fund treatment? Are there adequate resources to fund the lifestyle of dependents? How many months of funding will current resources provide? Or how much additional capital is required to bridge the deficiency? Once these post-loss objectives are set, the practitioner moves to second step or step 2. That is, by gathering the information necessary for risk identification, measurement, and evaluation. In other words, step 2 is the information gathering phase. Without adequate information, it is impossible to perform an accurate analysis of the client's personal risk exposures or make appropriate recommendations. There are 4 methods for gathering information. First is by discussion. For example, face-to-face interaction with the client to understand their financial position and goals directly. This enables the planner to ask follow-up questions, observe emotional reactions, and build rapport. This is described as giving the financial planner ample opportunity to understand the financial position of the client. Second is fact-finding form. That is a structured, formalized method of collecting broad-spectrum data on property-owned liabilities and income sources. If the form is well structured, the information obtained can be very comprehensive. This is the quantitative backbone of the discovery process. The third is physical observation. By evaluating the client's lifestyle, physical condition, personal disposition, and physically examining possessions, can reaffirm facts obtained through earlier discussions. This provides a reality check on information gathered through other methods. Fourth is by current coverage. That is, analyzing existing general and life insurance structures to reveal which risks are already covered and expose unprotected gaps. This prevents duplication and identifies the incremental coverage needed. Before the planner can identify specific risks, they must understand the three broad classes of loss exposure that every client and family faces. The statement here, generally the client and family are exposed to three classes of risk exposures, which are property, liability, and personal risk exposures. Property exposures is about risk arising out of the ownership, use, or holding of property. These include direct physical damage to assets and indirect loss of income that results from property damage. Property exposures are handled primarily by general insurance companies in Malaysia. Liability exposures is about risk arising from legal accountability to third parties for bodily harm, reputational damage, or property damage due to negligence or wrongdoing. Under the legal system, a court may order the payment of damages to the aggrieved party. Liability exposures are also handled primarily by general insurance companies. Personal exposures is about risk directly relating to the individual, involving the complete loss or decrease of earned income, additional incurred expenses, or the forced liquidation of accumulated wealth. Personal exposures are handled primarily by life insurance companies in Malaysia. This slide drills into two of the three exposure classes with greater specificity. The first one is property exposures. Property exposures is about direct versus indirect property exposures. Direct property exposures are risks relating to the physical damage or disappearance of an asset. Examples include theft, staff dishonesty, fire, and physical car accidents. These are the first order losses. The indirect property exposures are loss of income or increased expenses triggered by the primary property damage. For example, a car accident damages the vehicle, which we call as direct loss, but the subsequent medical expenses incurred treating the driver's injuries are indirect losses. The indirect loss is a consequence of the direct loss, not a separate event. Apart from property exposures, there is what we call as liability exposures. Under the current legal system, individuals can be held legally liable and ordered by a court to pay damages for wrongdoings, resulting in harm to a third party's body, reputation, or property. For example, accidentally knocking a bottle off a fifth floor window that hits a pedestrian below. The individual is held legally liable for the third party's bodily harm and resulting financial damages. The third class of loss exposure is personal risk. These are risks involving the entire loss or decrease of earned income, additional incurred expenses, and the forced liquidation of accumulated property. The personal risk radar here identifies 4 dominant personal risk factors. The first one is premature death that extinguishes the capacity to earn income for dependents, instantly halting future wealth accumulation. This is the most acute personal risk because its impact is immediate and total. The second one is retirement. Retirement is the structural risk of outliving accumulated wealth, requiring careful longevity planning. Unlike death, which is sudden, retirement is a slow burn risk that unfolds over decades. The third one is education planning. Education planning is the burden of funding massive time-bound future liabilities that cannot be deferred. Children reach university age regardless of the family's financial readiness. The last one is deterioration of health. We know that disability and medical coverage needs draining existing assets and sometimes stop income generation. This encompasses both critical illness and ongoing stability. Once information is gathered, step 3 analyzes it through a 3-stage process, which are identify, measure, and evaluate. Stage 1, identify. Identification means compiling a comprehensive master list of all pure risks detrimental to the client's financial position. We describe this as simply making a list of all risks that can have a detrimental effect on the client's financial situation. Stage 2 is to measure. Here, we need to calculate the exact quantum or monetary size of each identified risk. We emphasize that working out the quantum of protection for each category of risk is imperative for 3 reasons. First, the client understands exactly how much coverage is needed in each area. Second, it helps match available resources to protection costs. And third, it determines whether the client can afford the coverage. Stage 3 is about evaluating. Here, we determine the mathematical significance of each risk and its potential financial impact. Cross-reference against available client resources. The calculations from stage 2 provide the basis for deciding what actions to take. We, as financial planner, must also know and quantify the resources that will be available if a personal risk materializes. In stage 3, there are 2 categories of defensive resources that a client may have available. You can refer to your module in table 2.1. Category 1 is cash resources, which provide instant liquidity. Cash resources are resources received in cash and made available upon death within a reasonable time frame. Examples are cash in bank, EPF or Employees Provident Fund, contractual death gratuities, and life insurance payout. These are fast conversion resources that provide immediate liquidity when a risk event occurs. Category 2 are cash equivalent resources. That is what we call as near liquidity. Here, the resources are not natively in cash form, but generally convertible into cash without significant difficulty. Examples are unit trusts, listed shares, and other liquid investments. These sit further along the conversion spectrum and may take days or weeks to liquidate fully. The liquidity scale here shows between the two categories of the spectrum of conversion speed, from fast to medium to slower, reinforcing that not all resources are equally accessible in a crisis. This slide introduces the probability impact matrix for evaluating which risks warrant action and which can be safely ignored. This is because not all risks are significant and need to be managed. The probable occurrence and potential impact of the risk helps to determine which risk should be addressed. For high impact and low probability risk, the action is to manage and transfer the risk. Even with low occurrence probability, the sheer financial devastation requires immediate structural mitigation. Here, we can explain it as risks which have a slight chance of occurrence but carry potentially severe financial impact and should be managed. For low impact and low probability risk, the action here is to ignore. These risks are statistically insignificant and do not warrant capital allocation. In other words, these are risks that are low or insignificant in probability with a small potential impact. The sidebar in this slide makes a critical practical point. Client resources are rarely sufficient to mitigate all risk. Prioritization based on the probability impact matrix is mandatory. More often than not, the resources of the client are insufficient to mitigate all risk, and such prioritization based on the criteria above, which are probability and impact, must be undertaken. The financial practitioner should also inform the client of the risks that are not mitigated and the potential consequences to ensure the client is aware of what has been handled and what has not. Step 4 is where the practitioner selects and applies the appropriate risk management techniques. There are 4 major techniques here. First is risk avoidance, second is risk control, third is risk retention, and fourth is risk transfer. Risk avoidance is by removing or altering the source of risk entirely. There are 4 sub-techniques for risk avoidance. First is by elimination, that is by removing the source entirely. Second is by substitution, that is by replacing a dangerous activity with a safer one. Third is by separation, that is by dividing dangerous items to prevent hazardous combinations. And fourth is by rational planning, that is by creating contingency alternatives through careful study. Risk control is about dealing with unavoidable risks without fully transferring them. There are 3 sub-techniques, which are prevention, that is by reducing the chance of loss. Second is by reduction, that is by controlling severity when loss occurs. And by sharing, that is by distributing losses among multiple parties, such as business partners. Risk retention is the most pervasive form of dealing with risk. The mechanism for risk retention is by financing relatively bearable losses directly. Risk transfer is about shifting risk financing to external entities. There are 2 forms of risk transfer. First is by insurance-based products. That is by pure risk shifting to the insurer. And non-insurance based product, such as contractual transfer to another party. Here you can see the risk avoidance sub-techniques. The first one is elimination. That is by removing the source entirely, for example, quitting smoking, drinking, or anything to avoid degenerative diseases. That is by avoiding those activities entirely or any other dangerous activities such as dangerous sports to prevent injury. Substitution is by replacing a dangerous activity with a less dangerous one. For example, replacing the hobby of scuba diving with table tennis or what we call as ping pong. Separation is by physically dividing items to prevent dangerous mixtures. For example, by storing petrol and paper in separate storage areas to prevent fire. Rational planning is by developing alternative solutions through careful studies. For example, securing multiple suppliers for a critical raw material to avoid stock-out positions. For risk control sub-techniques, the first is by loss prevention. That is by reducing the chance of loss. For example, wearing proper protective attire when treating infectious patients. Loss reduction, however, is by controlling severity when an event occurs. For example, by using fire-resistant materials, by installing water sprinkler systems, or by installing smoke detectors in a factory or in a building. Loss sharing is by reducing individual liability by sharing risky ventures. For example, by getting a partner or partners into your business, so losses and liabilities are shared among more people, not only on you. For risk retention, or the most pervasive form of risk handling, only risks that would lead to relatively bearable losses should be retained. This is for planning purposes. This risk retention technique does not affect the frequency or severity of loss, but indicates how the individual will pay for the loss when it occurs. For example, by investing in negatively correlated shares. There is gains from rising shares in one class will offset losses in another one class of shares, effectively financing the loss internally. The self-insurance myth is technically an incongruity. For insurers to operate, there must be a transfer of risk or pooling of exposures, which no individual can do unto themselves. Most uninsured people, they are self-insured by default rather by choice. However, some businesses create dedicated reserve funds to cover potential losses, which is sometimes called self-insurance. For risk transfer, for the first sub-technique here, there is the non-insurance base. It is by using contractual transfer of risk to another party. For example, a property owner mandates a tenancy agreement that the tenant must insure the building. The risk is transferred, but the owner does not buy the insurance policy. For insurance-based technique, that is by pure risk shifting to an insurer. For example, by transferring the risk of lost earnings due to premature death to a life insurer, or simply said, by buying a life insurance product. Once the techniques are matched to the identified risk, the plan is ready for implementation. That is when we reach step 5. There are 3 key activities in this step. The first one is prioritization. That is by ranking risks in order to their importance and drawing directly from the probability impact analysis in step 3. The most severe risks with the highest potential financial devastation receive first attention and first allocation of resources. Second is by matching actions. That is by pairing each specific risk with the exact mechanism chosen in step 4. For example, executing the specific insurance policy for the death risk or implementing the specific separation protocol for a fire hazard. Third is by resource allocation. That is by committing the client's actual capital and cash flow to fund the plan's success. Here, the slide's funnel visual shows evaluated risk entering at the top and match actions emerging at the bottom, with resource allocation as the filtering mechanism in between. The final step in the risk management process involves 3 ongoing activities. First is undertaking periodic reviews. Second is monitoring the implementation of the risk management program. And third is adapting the plan to changes as the client's circumstances evolve. To trigger the plan revision, there are several categories of change that necessitate the plan revision. First is rising or falling income and earnings. Second is fluctuations in debt levels. Third is the evolution of entirely new needs. For example, the birth of a child requiring education planning. And fourth is the drastic shifts in personal circumstances. For example, a divorce that triggers alimony payment obligations. For continuous monitoring, this is because risk management is not a static document. It is a continuously evolving program. The financial planner should work jointly with the client and review any changing situation on an ongoing basis. Regular execution checks ensure the plan remains mathematically updated to meet the client's current shifting reality. The infinity loop visual on the slide reinforces this. That is, the process never truly ends. This is the table 6.2 from the module, which maps these events to their financial consequences, planning measures, and defensive instruments. Personal risk, okay, for example, death. The financial consequence is income loss and maybe also the final expenses. For this, the planning measures are estate planning and insurance planning, while the defensive instruments are life insurance, wills, and trust. For the disability risk event, the financial consequences here are income loss and, of course, treatment costs. The planning measures, for example, are health program and insurance planning, while the defensive instruments used here, that should be used here, are disability insurance and the power of attorney. For critical illness or dread disease risk event, the financial consequences are income loss and treatment costs. The planning measures for this are health program and insurance planning, while the defensive instruments are dread diseases insurance and also health insurance. For the retirement risk event, the financial consequences are income reduction, old age illness costs. The planning measures are prudent investments and reduce the expenditures before the retirement age, while the defensive instrument that should be used are, for example, EPF, funds, retirement funds, pensions, and annuities. For property, whether direct or indirect risk event, the financial consequences are replacement costs, repair costs, or income loss. The planning measures for this type of risk is by proper upkeep, safety measures, and insurance planning, while the defensive instrument that can be used are direct property insurance and consequential insurance. For liability risk event, the financial consequences are claims and settlement costs, and of course, the legal expenses. The planning measures that can be undertaken are safety measures and liability insurance. That is by using the defensive instrument, which is liability insurance. To wrap up my presentation today, it is worth to mention here that the true wealth conservation is an engineered outcome. By rigorously applying the 6-step process, that is from setting precise objectives to identifying exposures, measuring quantum impact, deploying targeted handling techniques, and continuously monitoring, the financial planner transforms from an advisor into the ultimate protector of the client's financial future. This closing statement synthesizes the entire chapter's argument. That is, risk management is not an ad hoc or intuitive. It is a systematic, structured, repeatable process. The 6 steps provide the framework. The 4 handling techniques provide the toolkit. The probability impact matrix provides the prioritization logic. And the continuous monitoring loop ensures the plan stays current. The golden sheet and gear visual here reinforces the message. That is, protection is engineered, not hoped for. The financial planner who masters this framework is equipped to handle any clients. That is, any client's risk landscape systematically.